Welcome, everyone, to Friday 15 with Master B2B. My name is Brian Beck. I'm here with Andy Moore, my partner in this thought leadership series. I'm coming to you live here from southern Utah, St. George, right by the Zion National Park. Andy, hey, our music ended abruptly there. That's not cool. I guess the band didn't get paid and they walked off the stage. I'm not sure. Anyhow, Andy, welcome
You're
to
in a
Friday.
different state. You're a different state, different licensing rules in Utah.
Right? I just turned the music off after 10 seconds. Anyhow, welcome everyone to Friday 15. We got an exciting and fun episode for you today. We're going to be talking about a topic which is dear and dear to our practitioners' hearts. But before we get into all that, let's talk about some breaking news. Andy, eMarketer this week talked about the tariffs, right? The topic of the day, right? And CFOs are split on the share of tariffs they will pass along to their customers. This was a survey done of about 200 CFOs, is by Gartner, and they report and eMarketer reported out on it. And what's fascinating is, 30% of chief financial officers anticipate passing 91 to 100% of tariffs along, but just as many, or nearly as many, 29% said they anticipate passing on less than 10%. So to me, this is like, we don't know what to do. Isn't that what your read is on this? What do you think?
Yeah, this really echoes what we found in our conversation. So last week I was on the road in Ohio. We had an event in Cleveland and in Cincinnati where we talked about tariffs. And then earlier this week, we did a special Nexus session.
Yeah.
Which we didn't mention at the end, but just for basically Nexus members, where we talked about in more detail about the tariffs. And I think that, we're going to share out some of the stuff, but I think the takeaway was nobody really has any idea what's going to happen here. Nobody knows what's happening in Washington. Nobody knows what's happening relative to their businesses. And then nobody knows what to tell customers. Other than that, there's perfect clarity around this. So
Right.
I'm not surprised when you see numbers like this that are so bifurcated, where the same number of people say we're passing all of it along, and the same number of people are saying no, we're not passing any of it along. I mean, what we heard earlier this week is that companies are now have tariff teams. That was an interesting phrase that people used.
Yep.
They're meeting every day in some cases to talk about this. Most people are being pretty transparent and are just creating tables and saying this is a surcharge.
Yes.
But we'll share out some of that stuff. But yeah, I'm not surprised by this at all. Nobody really knows.
Yeah, it's interesting. I spent a lot of time on Amazon and Amazon Business with my company and SEBA, Andy, and talk a lot with B2B companies who are thinking about this. And in a lot of ways, this is creating opportunity, they think, as it relates to competition out of China and Asia, where these companies have sold products, competing products, and now they're going to have to raise their prices or perhaps exit the U.S. entirely and Amazon entirely because they can't sustainably compete based on price anymore, or at least, if these tariffs continue. So I think there's dynamics like that happening all over the place. Keeping our eyes on Amazon as a leading indicator, I think, will be interesting to see.
Yeah, one side note that came up earlier this week is there was a lot of discussion about identifying country of origin. For any of this to work, you have to know where the product's actually made. And it was a surprising number of B2B companies, and I don't think, not surprising, and it's surprising in that they didn't have a process in place. And not surprising it's so complicated. They don't know exactly where the products are necessarily made, and now they're going to have to be held account for that. So stay tuned.
Yeah, we'll see. This is evolving. We'll keep our finger on the pulse here. Well, we asked this question, Andy, at our Mindshare Summit at the University of Chicago recently. We asked the attendees, we had 100 or so people there, practitioners from B2B manufacturers and distributors, where are you spending your next dollar? Obviously, this is relative to, to digital commerce related digital transformation investments. And we got some really interesting replies. So we wanted to talk about that today on our Friday 15 and actually, get also some broader feedback from our LinkedIn community as well. So there's just sort of at the summit, there's so many different options that were presented, everything from Google AdWords to AI to enhancing the platform, e-commerce platform, PIM, the portals, B2B portals, Amazon and Amazon Business expansion, finding a systems integrator, e-commerce adoption programs, ROI, revenue optimization, increasing average order value. there's so many different places that an e-commerce executive can invest. And what was interesting was what surfaced during the summit. What did you think would surface, Andy? What are your thoughts here?
Well, I was fortunate that this is my table. I had the table for where you're spending your next dollar. And so these are actually my notes. I wrote down every single one of the answers. So like 15 to 20 different answers. Now we're about to say they coalesced around two specific areas, but it just does show you that it isn't as straightforward as it used to be. There's so many challenges facing these executives that they can't just say, oh, it's one of three areas. Again, there were two that rose to the surface, but look at this. I mean, we probably could have continued the conversation and got another 20. So it shows that there's a variety of people who are attending our events. There's a variety of issues that they're facing.
Right.
And that, it's a multifaceted world.
Exactly. So what surfaced?
Well, interestingly, number one was enhancing the e-commerce platform. And we'll talk about what we mean about that in a moment. Not surprisingly, product information and PIM. I think you and I have talked about this extensively. If that wasn't in the top two or three, then I think there'd be a problem with that company. But let's go back to the enhancing the commerce platform. We got a question about that, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But why enhancing the e-commerce platform? Why isn't it replacing the platform? And the reason why is because a lot of companies are not replacing their platforms necessarily. They're building on top of it. Either they've decided this is the anchor for their digital operation, or they don't have budget right now to replace it, or there are new technologies that have come along that have made it more enhanceable, new ways to configure things that required customization before, new plugins that have become available, new ways to connect to vertical marketplaces, you name it. So really this has evolved away from saying just a standard platform or re-platform argument, more toward how do we get more out of our existing platform?
And in those discussions, Andy, at the table, where there's specific areas, because what we're really saying here is this is about enhancing the platform, is really about improving the digital experience, right? I mean, it's and delivering a better experience. Were there areas specifically within that during your conversations that surfaced, things like search or personalization or creating, custom catalogs or different, just eliminating friction through checkout? I mean, were there certain things that kind of surfaced in your discussions there related to if it wasn't replatforming, then where were they focused, in terms of functionality?
Well, one big one that seems to come up a lot is personalization.
Okay.
And funny enough, some of this enhancing the e-commerce platform is using the functionality they've already bought.
Right.
So it's already there. They just haven't proverbially flipped on the switch. I mean, how many times have we heard this, for example, about PIMs? We bought a PIM. It's just sitting there. Well, there are people who have modules within their e-commerce platform that they never activated. So enhancing is also another code word for let's use what we've already paid for and use what we've never implemented. So yeah, I think personalization was probably the biggest theme. Search didn't come up much in this conversation, which was a little surprising. I'm getting the sense that search has become one of those things where either you've done it or you're not going to do it.
Right.
Now, it doesn't mean that there's not a market for search. There certainly is. But I think there are two camps now. There are some people who are like, we're going to settle for the search we have. And they're still in the first generation search problem, as I say, because they haven't realized that the native search capability isn't good enough. They haven't had that experience yet. And then there are the people in the other camp who have had that experience and decided, wait a minute, the search we got out of the box, while acceptable, is far from high performing. And so that's probably why it didn't come up. It's come up in the past. But yeah, I'd say, coming back to your question, it's personalization. That's been the one area.
Interesting. Well, this is an interesting quote from Thomas Sowell. He's an economist. Yeah. There are no solutions. There are only trade-offs.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting because
depressing.
I thought it's interesting because spoken like a true economist, but the last list you showed was those are all things that have to get done. The question is, where do you focus? And so it really does come down to opportunity cost, which is trade-offs. Right. So we thought it'd be interesting to kind of think through and talk about the different models. I don't want to talk about each one of these models. I just want to say that if you're looking for a model for trade-off decision making, there are thousands, quite literally, of these things. And they all have their different benefits. But I think there's one thing that is consistent here is that you can't just like throw your finger up in the air and go, yeah, let's do this. Or IT says they want to do it. Well, let's just defer to IT. Or the CEO liked a piece of functionality. Let's do that. I mean, I've been on the other end of this thing where you gather all the requirements. And yes, there is some dimension of people being personally involved, which is the next slide, where we talk about, when it comes to decision making, there are a lot of dimensions to it. There are alternatives, there are uncertainties, there's opportunity costs, there are consequences. And that one in purple there, interpersonal issues, that's a biggie because people get married to ideas. They want to do something. It becomes an emotional connection for them, which leads to the last one around complexity. But yes, to the next slide. Ultimately, the decision you make, how you prioritize, the trade-offs you make should be mapped to this. And for those who can't read it, it says, a satisfied customer is the best business strategy of all.
Right.
At the end of the day, you should be prioritizing what's going to have the maximum impact for customer satisfaction. And again, I've lived in this world. I talk to a lot of companies, and you do too. I would be challenged to say that most companies, except for Amazon, really have this at the core of their being.
Yeah, I would agree with that. In fact, it's funny, as you were reading this quote here, Andy, I hadn't seen this prior to our Friday 15 today. I would say that, gosh, that came out of Jeff Bezos's mouth, the founder of Amazon, because that is, if there is one company that does this well, it is that. And it is really about establishing that feedback loop to allow the customer to voice to come through. It's fascinating too. I mean, even the way, since we're talking about Amazon, even the way that they deal with their suppliers, it really, a lot of traditional, manufacturers, distributors get hung up on the relationship between themselves, right? Oh, my manufacturer, my distributor. And what gets lost in that is the customer. Ultimately, what's the end user, need out of all this value chain, the supply chain from manufacturer to distributor to customer? They get hung up and influenced by these relationships between, if I'm a distributor, big distributor buying from a supplier, and what ends up happening half the time is that that relationship influences what ends up being delivered to the customer, the experience that gets delivered to the customer, which isn't often in the best value
Interest,
customer best interest. Thank you. But that's not the way Amazon works. If you go to Amazon and you negotiate with Amazon through their wholesale programs, you're just a widget. They don't care who you are. It's a very different experience. It's there's still obviously people to talk to and things like that, but it's not like a traditional distributor manufacturer relationship, and that's by design. The customer ultimately wins. So it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and it speaks to one thing. Companies that are truly data-driven are driven by data from customers. Right. Not data from partners, not data from internal constituencies, not data from executives. Should come from the customers, as obvious that statement is. But there is one sort of challenge to this prioritization overall, which is, ROI expectations have changed. So what's now prioritized, there might be functionality that customers want, and you might say, well, we have to map to that, but there could be pressure to deliver an ROI. So it could be functionality that will make customers happier, but not necessarily make them purchase more or purchase more higher margin products. So there could be a kind of cross purposes there around ROI modifying your prioritization. And so we've talked to companies who've said, yeah, I'd really love to do this because it's creating a bad customer experience, but I have this pressure from the CFO who says you got to hit your numbers, and sometimes they're not the same thing.
That's right. I mean, you think about, the old adage about a public versus a private company. And in a private company, you've got more time, presumably in some cases, versus a public company where you're trying to make numbers. I remember, Andy, back when I was in the consumer side of e-commerce, I worked for a public company that was in the apparel space, apparel retail. And inevitably, at the end of every quarter, what are we doing? We're doing sales to push our promotions and coupons and discounts to push our revenue higher, because just to make our number for the quarter in terms of top line revenue. if that's not self-defeating behavior, I don't know what is. It's short-term thinking, and it's it doesn't does it give the customer a deal? Sure. What does it do? It gets them addicted to buying at a discount from your company, right?
Sure does.
And devalues your brand longer term. The brand of your products, because you're just offering everything at a lower price. So it's that's the risk we face as our ROI expectations get higher. But frankly, I'd rather see more money going to digital, which is why this is sort of a result of more money being pushed into e-commerce now by B2B companies. They want to see a return. So it's in some ways, maybe it's inevitable that we see these higher ROI expectations. So we surveyed our audience and we asked them, where are you planning to put the next dollar? This is on LinkedIn, a LinkedIn poll, put it up a few days ago. Number one was enhancing the e-commerce platform, 48%. Number two, fixing product info, or PIM, which reflects exactly what we heard at the summit. Site search was down at 19%. And then, of course, we had to ask the question, do you even have a dollar to spend? 7% said they didn't, which is interesting. So budget, anecdotally or through this data here, we're seeing, I think, that, the digital is now getting dollars. It's getting investment allocated towards it. But with that funding comes greater responsibility and pressure, as we've shared. So, and this list could go on, and we got some feedback from our audience too. Val Dumerant, I'm not sure, is that how you say her last name?
Duvernay. Yeah, Val Duvernay.
Thank you. Sorry, Val. Formerly with McKesson and Advanced Auto Parts. Enhancing e-com platform is an interesting way to put that. What does that mean? Adding functionality that doesn't exist to a current platform, changing platforms to enhance capabilities, adding third-party tech. Inquiring minds want to know, Val, we defined it kind of just a few minutes ago, but I think it really is layering on top of what you have and improving what you have in place already. And then Dan Burton, Digital Director of Client Delivery at Accenture, he said, happy to see that product data or fixing product information is trending so high. I still believe that e-commerce or commerce and product leaders largely underestimate the power of building good product data governance and centralizing product information. It's truly the foundation. So I agree with you there, Dan. I think we've got a lot of foundational work still to do in this industry. So, where do you put your next dollar? I think to some degree varies by, industry as well, and kind of what you have in front of you and your state of digital maturity, which we have models for that you can pull. Go to our website. You can find some of those to assess your own digital maturity. So, Andy, we got to make a few announcements here because we're coming to the end of our Friday, 20 as usual. Nexus, we are now up and running with our Nexus service. Nexus, as Andy was describing, we're having meetings with Nexus members talking about specific issues that our practitioners are facing. Nexus is a personal digital lifeline for B2B e-commerce executives. We're providing custom advice exclusively for you to eliminate your risks of making bad decisions. We want to make good decisions here. And for handling complex issues, you get a concierge. We're having private events and custom research, and really we'll answer your questions very quickly that you have. You can go to our website, masterb2b.com, and look at Nexus and to find out more. That program's up and running. We've got some great executives already participating in that. We have our forum, which encourage you folks to take a look at masterb2b.com. Go to our forum. It is free for practitioners. It is only practitioners, no solution providers or vendors. We have hundreds of people in there talking every day in a private online community, in confidence. It's a great place to meet and network with other executives. We have a couple of roundtables still coming up, Andy, in 2025, and just in the next month. We're going to be in New York City, Minneapolis, and Los Angeles. These are groups of 20 to 25 executives meeting in awesome locations, talking about digital experience and leveraging data. This time around, we're talking data and how to use that to create differentiated digital experiences. Go to our website. You can find out more and sign up. It is free for practitioners. And finally, I want to remind everyone that every Friday 15 episode is available via podcast on your favorite podcast streaming service, Google, Spotify, Apple, our website, YouTube. And please give us a review. It really helps, guys. Hope if you enjoy what we're doing here, it does help us to kind of spread the word and also reach new folks with this content. So, Andy, Friday 21 here. My goodness. Any final words for on this topic?
Well, it is April 18th in Chicago, Illinois, and it's 81 degrees here today. So I will be outside enjoying the weather. I will say that much.
Excellent. Well, enjoy it. Welcome back to Chicago. I know you and I are always on the road. We will see you all next Friday on our next Friday 15. Hope you enjoyed the episode today, and we'll talk to you soon. Adios. Have a good weekend, Mr. Hoare.
You too.